What if some of Earth's largest creatures didn't actually vanish into the pages of history, but simply learned how to stay hidden from our prying eyes forever? For millennia, humanity has whispered stories of giant, elusive beings roaming the edges of our maps, occupying the cold, silent spaces where our modern civilization fears to tread. Across the towering, snow-dusted peaks of the Himalayas, local legends describe the Yeti, a towering, bipedal hominid that moves like a ghost through the thin, biting mountain air. Deep within the dense, humid rainforests of South America, indigenous lore tells of the Mapinguari, a massive, powerful beast that leaves a trail of terror in its wake. In the temperate woodlands of North America, the legend of Bigfoot persists, a colossal figure standing on the boundary between biological reality and campfire folklore mystery. These are not just tall tales meant to frighten children, they are cultural echoes of a human desire to believe that the world is still vast and unconquered. When we look at these legends through the lens of evolutionary biology, we are forced to ask, how much of the unknown is still hiding in the shadows? Historically, we have categorized these stories as mere projections of our own fears, a psychological manifestation of the wilderness that we once struggled to survive against daily. Yet, our ancestors were observant naturalists, intimately familiar with every creature in their environment, which makes their insistence on these outsider species deeply, undeniably unsettling for us. Why do so many disparate cultures, separated by oceans and mountains, arrive at a similar conclusion? That we are not the only large, upright bipeds walking this planet. The strongest evidence often comes in the form of footprints, strange, oversized impressions found in mud or snow that defy the known anatomy of existing local animals. Explorers and mountain climbers have returned for decades with tales of hearing guttural, non-human vocalizations echoing across valleys where no other living soul should be present. In the 20th century, expeditions led by serious researchers like the 1950s Daily Mail search for the Yeti returned with skin samples and hair that baffled experts. These physical traces felt, for a fleeting moment, like the smoking gun that would bridge the gap between myth and the formal, dry records of zoology. For those who witnessed them, these encounters were not mysteries. They were tangible, visceral experiences that defied the neat, organized boxes of their scientific worldviews. However, the barrier between a compelling anecdote and a recognized species is a mountain of rigorous, repeatable data that has, so far, remained frustratingly out of our reach. When we subject these legends to the cold, analytical scrutiny of modern science, the silhouette of the creature begins to blur into something far more mundane. We must ask ourselves if we are looking for a new biological entity or if we are simply looking for a mirror to our own sense of wonder. As we move deeper into the investigation, the landscape shifts from the rugged mountain passes to the sterile, high-tech environment of modern genetic sequencing laboratories. The quest to find these creatures is fundamentally a quest to understand our own place in the grand, branching tree of life that covers our fragile planet. The scientific method demands evidence that can be touched, weighed, and sequenced. Yet these cryptids exist largely in the domain of fuzzy photographs and subjective memories. In the late 20th century, DNA technology promised to peel back the layers of these mysteries, turning legend into taxonomy through the analysis of biological remains. Researchers like Brian Sykes, a professor of genetics, launched high-profile studies to test Yeti hair samples collected from various remote regions across the Himalayan landscape. The results were a sobering encounter with the truth. The samples were not from an unknown hominid, but from known animals like brown bears and wolves. This illustrates a profound truth about our biology. Our brains are masters of pattern recognition, often overinterpreting stimuli to identify human-like shapes in chaotic, dark environments. When a bear stands on its hind legs to forage, its silhouette can briefly mimic the proportions of a large primate, sparking a lifetime of convinced belief. This phenomenon, known as pareidolia, combined with the extreme physiological stress of high altitudes, can turn a simple natural event into a legendary, singular encounter. Furthermore, the ecosystems that these creatures allegedly inhabit, deep forests and high peaks, are incredibly sparse in terms of biomass and available food resources. To sustain a viable population of large, undocumented primates, we would expect to see thousands of individuals, not just occasional, solitary sightings reported every few years. Population biology sets a hard limit on what can remain hidden. as a breeding population leaves behind clear ecological footprints that we simply do not observe. We look for evidence in the form of scat, carcasses, or clear genetic signatures in the local environment, yet these landscapes remain stubbornly silent on the subject. This leads us to the uncomfortable conclusion that if these creatures were real, they would be competing for space with us in ways that would leave undeniable traces. Every large mammal on Earth, from the polar bear to the mountain gorilla, has been catalogued. There is no empty space on the map for such giants. Yet, the absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence in a world that is still rapidly revealing new species to our modern scientific instruments. Just recently, we discovered entirely new branches of human lineage like the Denisovans, proving that our past is far more crowded than we ever dared imagine. So, why do we maintain such a fierce, emotional attachment to the idea that something ancient and wild might still be watching us from the trees? Perhaps it is because our modern, hyper-connected world feels strangely small, and we yearn for the return of the truly unknown, the mysterious, and the unreachable. We treat these legends not as scientific failures, but as artifacts of a human consciousness that refuses to accept that the wild has been fully tamed. They serve as a symbolic reminder that we are merely guests on a planet that holds secrets far older than our fragile, written human history books. We shift our focus now to the sociological implications of this mystery, asking how our deepest fears and wonders shape the very reality we try to define. The existence of these legends says more about the human condition than it does about the actual biological reality of the animals we seek to find. We are a species defined by our need to tell stories, to turn the terrifying unknown into a narrative that we can hold, understand, and perhaps control. Throughout history, folklore acted as a vital educational tool, warning children of dangerous predators or hazardous terrains through the medium of the monster. If a child fears a giant beast in the deep forest, they are less likely to wander off and fall victim to real, tangible dangers like predators or cliffs. These creatures exist in the liminal spaces of our culture, acting as mirrors to our collective anxieties about the environment and our own place in it. As we industrialized the world, these legends evolved. They became a protest against the cold, clinical nature of a world stripped of its ancient magic. Modern reports of Bigfoot are often linked to moments of solitude in nature, where the human ego begins to dissolve into the vastness of the woods. In those rare, quiet moments, our senses go on high alert, and the brain projects our primal survival instincts onto the surrounding shifting shadows. Science tells us that we have evolved to be hyper-vigilant, a trait that helped our ancestors survive in a world filled with real, dangerous threats. Today, that same vigilance has no predators to focus on, so it anchors itself to the legends that still linger in the peripheral of our civilization. The persistence of these myths is also fueled by the democratization of information, where one blurry video can trigger a global cycle of intense, speculative wonder. We no longer wait for scientific journals to tell us what is true. We witness the birth of myths in real time across billions of connected screens. This makes the investigation of cryptids a fascinating study in modern sociology, showing us how easily belief systems can be constructed without any physical proof. But we must not dismiss this belief as mere stupidity. It is a manifestation of the profound and beautiful human desire for magic to remain in the world. To live in a world where everything is catalogued, where every corner is mapped by satellites, is to live in a world that feels slightly smaller. These creatures provide an escape hatch, a way for our imaginations to wander into the dark, uncharted woods, even if only for a few fleeting moments. Yet, we must be careful not to allow the allure of the unknown to obscure the spectacular reality of the species we actually share this planet with. Real nature is far more bizarre and interesting than any cryptid, from the deep-sea creatures that glow in the dark to the fungi that connect entire forests. We find ourselves standing at a crossroads where we must choose between the comfort of our myths and the often humbling, but infinitely more complex, truth. In the next part, we will explore the extreme environments where these legends persist and why they act as magnets for our most powerful, deep-seated curiosities. High-altitude peaks and deep, inaccessible rainforests serve as the perfect geographic stage for legends to grow and withstand the test of time. These are the blank spots of our modern world, the final frontiers where the lack of human presence allows our imaginations to fill in the gaps. When we climb to the top of a mountain, we enter an environment that is hostile to human biology, where the air is thin and the cold is lethal. It is in these moments of extreme physiological stress that our brain begins to interpret the environment through the lens of our deepest survival anxieties. The howling winds of the Himalayas or the strange clicking noises of an Amazonian jungle are not just sounds, they are inputs that we urgently need to decode. If we cannot identify the source, we label it with a name that we already know, turning the rustle of a bush into the movement of a giant. This human habit of attributing intention and consciousness to the unknown is a relic of our evolutionary past, where survival depended on avoiding predators. If you are a hunter-gatherer, assuming a rustling leaf is a tiger is a safe bet. Being wrong means you are merely cautious, but being right saves your life. This hyperactive agency detection is the root of our belief in spirits, monsters, and mythical creatures across every single continent on the planet. Today, we have replaced the tiger with the Yeti or the Bigfoot, but the psychological mechanism remains exactly as it was 10,000 years ago. These environments act as sensory deprivation tanks, stripping away our usual distractions and forcing us to confront the silence of the wilderness. In that silence, we begin to hear the stories that were passed down to us, the cultural narratives that define how we perceive the untamed world. Scientists who study these regions are often struck by how the landscape itself seems to encourage the creation of mystery and the persistence of legends. The sheer scale of the Andes, the Himalayas, or the dense Amazon creates a sense of vulnerability that humans instinctively try to rationalize. We feel so small against the backdrop of these towering geological forces that we conjure massive beings to justify the feeling of being watched. It is a way of externalizing our internal sense of inferiority when faced with the crushing, indifferent power of the Earth's natural topography. Science reminds us that we are just one species among many, but our myths prefer to put us back at the center of a world filled with secrets. We are not just exploring the geography of the planet, we are exploring the architecture of the human ego and how it handles being confronted by the vast. It is fascinating to realize that our search for these creatures is actually a search for a world that remains bigger than us, a world that is not yet fully mapped. As we look toward the potential of the future, we ask whether our growing scientific power will finally silence these legends or simply change them. As we look toward the future, the integration of advanced surveillance and autonomous environmental monitoring might finally provide the answer we have been seeking. We are deploying thousands of camera traps, satellite sensors, and high-fidelity audio equipment into the deepest corners of the world to monitor biodiversity. Every year, we capture millions of hours of footage, providing us with an unprecedented, high-resolution map of what actually lives in the wild. If there were a large unknown hominid species living in these regions, the statistical probability of it evading this digital web is rapidly approaching zero. We are essentially shrinking the box of the unknown, forcing these legends to either be proven as real biological entities or fade into folklore. This shift from speculative searching to rigorous, planetary-scale monitoring is one of the greatest scientific accomplishments of our modern era. Yet there is a strange, subtle tension. As we gain this clarity, we lose a little bit of the mystery that once colored our understanding of the planet. We are becoming the masters of our environment in a way our ancestors could never have comprehended, knowing exactly what species live in every square mile. This scientific triumph is a double-edged sword. We gain knowledge, but we lose the excitement of the what-if that drives human discovery. We are finding that nature is filled with real, incredible creatures that are far more complex and bizarre than the legends we used to fear. The discovery of deep-sea ecosystems with no light, or fungi that can communicate across entire continents, proves that we don't need monsters to be amazed. Science is not destroying the magic of the world. It is replacing superficial myths with a deep, tangible appreciation for the complexity of life. Our curiosity is being redirected from searching for monsters to understanding the delicate, interconnected webs of the ecosystems that surround us today. We are realizing that the unknown is not a physical place on a map, but a frontier of knowledge that we are expanding every single day. The Yeti and Bigfoot represent a desire to find something human-like in the wilderness, an echo of ourselves in the deep, untamed world. But perhaps, instead of looking for hidden humans, we should look for the hidden connections that bind all living things together into a single, fragile planet. We are part of an evolutionary process that is still ongoing, a journey that has brought us from the depths of the ocean to the peaks of the mountains. The mystery of the cryptid is a bridge we had to cross to reach the point where we could truly observe the world with clarity and precision. Now, we are equipped with the tools to observe the planet as a whole, to see the vast, interconnected reality of life in its most beautiful, honest form. The legend of the hidden creature is slowly being replaced by the awe-inspiring reality of a planet that is alive with a complexity beyond our imagination. As we conclude this exploration, we return to the question we began with: what does it mean to live in a world that is no longer unknown? We have moved past the age of monsters and legends, entering a new era where we must face the reality of our role as guardians of this planet. The monsters we once feared are no longer the greatest threats to our future. It is our own impact on the natural world that we now must watch. The blank spots on our maps are not empty spaces waiting for giants, but fragile habitats that need our protection to survive the coming century. Our curiosity, which once birthed the legends of the Yeti and Bigfoot, is now being channeled into solving the complex challenges of climate, energy, and biodiversity. The sense of awe we felt when we believed in giants can now be directed toward the vast, intricate mechanics of the planet that sustains our lives. Science is not the end of wonder, but the beginning of a deeper, more profound connection to the reality of the universe and our place within it. We are the ones who can tell the story of the Earth, a narrative far more powerful and enduring than any myth we ever constructed in the dark. Perhaps the true hidden species were always us, a species that had to grow up, learn to look clearly, and finally take responsibility for its own home. As we stand on the threshold of a new future, we carry the stories of the past with us, using them to remind us of the wonder we once found in the shadows. But we also carry the light of knowledge, a torch that illuminates the path forward through the vast, complex, and beautiful reality of our shared planet. The world is still vast, still deep, and still incredibly strange, and there will always be more to learn, to study, and to wonder about together. So, the next time you walk through the woods and feel that familiar shiver, that feeling of being watched by something ancient, take a moment to pause. Know that the feeling is a part of who you are, a vestige of the long, evolutionary journey that brought you to this moment in time. Then, look at the trees, the soil, and the life around you, with a fresh pair of eyes, seeing the complex, beautiful, and real wonders that are actually there. We are not alone, but not because of monsters. We are surrounded by a vibrant, living network of life that we are only just beginning to truly understand. The mystery is not dead, it has simply evolved into something more profound, something that invites us to keep searching, questioning, and growing together. Let us embrace the reality of our planet with all its challenges and beauties, and continue to find wonder in the light of our growing understanding. For in the end, it is our ability to seek, to learn, and to share that makes us human, and that is a wonder greater than any legend could ever hold. What new mysteries will we uncover when we stop looking for what we want to find and start looking for what is actually there?